In his past life, Lu Yunxiang was young and widowed, working hard for most of his life to support the turbulent Jing'an Marquis mansion. When she was covered in blonde hair, she realized that her husband was actually not dead and had been hiding in a secluded paradise with other women, loving each other. My mother-in-law and aunt both know, but in order to force her to become a cow and a horse, they kept it from her. Until death, she never enjoyed a day of happiness. Opening his eyes again, Lu Yunxiang was reborn in the third year of marrying into the Jing'an Marquis mansion. Since the Marquis mansion was unfair to her, she overturned everything and wanted to betray her scumbag to pay the price. Becoming the #1 female merchant in the world, wielding power over the court and the public. However, how did Yen Mu, the treacherous minister who used her as a substitute in his previous life, stick to her? Shouldn't they be willing to sacrifice themselves to support Bai Yueguang's son's ascension to the throne? Yen Mu. Hurry up and get rid of that scumbag. The child must go to the Yen family's genealogy. Lu Yunxiang. Keywords of the novel. Yunbin Luan. Unable to escape when offended by treacherous officials without a pop-up window, Yunbin Luan. Unable to escape when offended by treacherous officials. Download the full text. Yunbin Luan. Unable to escape when offended by treacherous officials. Latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Cursed to Death. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Cursed to death, madam, I'm afraid your body won't be able to take it anymore. Let's take a night off at the inn and go up the mountain tomorrow. In the carriage, Grandma Jean looked at her master, Lu Yunxiang, the old lady of Jing'an Marquis' mansion, with some concern. She has just turned 50 and should have been elegant and luxurious, but she has been working hard all her life, showing a more aged appearance than her actual age, and her body and bones are getting worse and worse. The old lady opened her eyes, with a hint of resentment on her old face. Let's go up the mountain today, cough. Old lady. Grandma Jean quickly helped the old lady and saw that she had vomited a mouthful of blood. I'm not willing to see him before I die. Lu Yunxiang pushed aside Grandma Jean and worked hard to suppress the surging blood pressure. Grandma Jean had no choice but to help Madame Lu get off the car. They came here after a tiring journey, but Wangshe village is in the mountains, and this section of the mountain road is rugged, especially after rain, so they can only hike up. Lu Yunxiang's legs and feet are not good, and walking this mountain road is very difficult. As soon as she walked not far, she couldn't straighten up, but she refused to stop, even if she took a moment to rest. She married Xie Zian, the third son of the Jing'an Marquis' mansion, at the age of 16. On the night of their marriage, before her marriage was completed, her husband urgently summoned her to battle. After leaving, I can't imagine never coming back again. Being a widow at a young age, the Marquis' mansion declined, and all the men died. They were old and young, so she could only support this family. Until now, for a lifetime, I have come here in a daze. Nowadays, the Marquis' mansion ranks first among the 8 major aristocratic families, and she can also be considered worthy of the ancestors of the Xie family and her deceased husband. When he was supposed to rest in his prime, his husband, who had been dead for 40 years, unexpectedly received news. Finally, I have finished walking this mountain road. Looking up again, the peach blossoms on the mountains and slopes are in full bloom. Clusters and clusters, like clouds and brocade, the wind blows by, and the pink petals are like a shower of flowers. The letter said. Peach forest winding paths lead to seclusion, with courtyards in all directions and walls covered with flowers and trees. That is his home. Walking along Qingshe Road, stepping on thick peach petals, smelling the fragrance of peach blossoms, as if in a fairyland. I don't want there to be such a paradise on the outskirts of Xingjing. Lu Yunxiang once fantasized that when she grew older and could let go of her family affairs, she would find a peaceful place to retire. Unfortunately, she has been thinking and dreaming for a lifetime, but she still can't let go of this hand. There is a small stream in front of me, and the flowing water is filled with pink petals, so beautiful that it makes people feel dazed. The stream is built on a wooden bridge, and after crossing the bridge, one can see the square courtyard. As mentioned in the letter, the wall was covered with flowers and vines, all in a vibrant and colorful state. Madam, still. Grandma Jin's face was filled with heartache. It's already here, I need to go see him. Lu Yunxiang patted Grandma Jin's hand. She had a calm and resilient temperament when she was young, but as she grew older, she was gentle and charitable. She lived a peaceful life. The wooden door was open, and Lu Yunxiang walked to the door and saw a tall man pruning a peach tree. He was wearing a green shirt and a short haircut, with white hair, but not much, and his body was not hunched. Grandpa, I want that peach blossom. I want it too. 6 or 7 children ran out of the house, begging the man to cut peach blossom branches for them. These children are about 10 years old and 2 or 3 years old, with boys and girls, all white, chubby, and very cute. The man cut one branch according to this one, and another branch according to that one, making the children happily circle around the peach tree. You, please spoil them. After cutting off these peach blossom branches, will they still bear peaches this year? At this moment, a woman came out of the room, wearing a cloud brocade spring shirt, with black hair and a rosy complexion, supporting the man down the wooden ladder with a smile. Children and grandchildren wrap around their knees, enjoying the happiness of family. The man smiled. When the man turned around, he saw a strange face, and it took Lu Yunxiang a while to see some familiarity on this face. Jin Yen, is that him? Grandma Jin sighed and said, it's Third Lord. Is the woman next to him his wife? At most, it can be considered as an outer room. They look much younger than me, Lu Yunxiang said with a bitter smile. Grandma Jin was full of bitterness and said, oh, you have supported such a large marquise mansion and worked hard all your life. They live a leisurely life in this beautiful place with clear mountains and rivers. How can we compare this? There is no comparison. The man cut another peach blossom and carefully inserted it into the woman's bun. Lin Yang, you are still so beautiful. The woman, at an advanced age, still looks shy upon hearing these words. By the way, the Marquis' mansion wrote a letter saying that the person is sick, and I'm afraid there won't be much time left. Why don't you go back and take a look? The man held the woman's hand and said, do you want me to go? How could I hope my husband would meet another woman? Then I won't go, I don't have much relationship with her. Okay. The man sat under the peach blossom tree holding the woman, and a group of children frolicked around them. On the way back, Grandma Jean was very worried when she saw the old lady keep her eyes closed. Madam, your health is not good. Shall we rest for 2 days at the inn first? Grandma Jean, seeing that the old lady did not respond, asked again, but still did not respond. She panicked and hurriedly went to check the old lady's breathing, but it was already gone. The old lady has passed away. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Pregnancy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Pregnancy. Last night, the rain was sparse and the wind was strong, and the fallen flowers and leaves blew down the entire courtyard. The west window was opened, and a damp wind blew in, leaving a cold sensation on my face. Lu Yunxiang leaned against Arhat's bed and stared at a peach blossom coming in from the window corner. Madam, the accounting room is here. Jin Yen ran in with a jolt, with a few petals on her head and a wet body. Lu Yunxiang was taken aback when he saw such a young and lively Jin Yen. It took a while for her to come to her senses. Yes, she was reborn, until her 3rd year of marriage into the Marquis' mansion. Let the accountant come in. The accountant is an old man with a white beard who has been in charge of accounting in the Marquis' mansion for over 30 years. He is very thin and has a shrewd appearance on his face. He was wearing a blue robe and holding a stack of account books in his hand. Mr. Hu, thank you for taking this trip. Put the ledger here, said Lu Yunxiang. Why did Madame San suddenly check her account, but what happened? Hu Wangfang asked with some indication. Checking accounts is naturally a matter on the books, but even if the accounts are clear, there are still areas of confusion, so he is afraid that these three ladies will intentionally find fault with him. Lu Yunxiang smiled faintly and said, 2 years ago, the Marquis' mansion was raided. Now, the several shops and good fields on this account are all my dowry, right? The accountant paused for a moment and said, yes. Can I check my own things? Hu Wangfang had nothing to say and placed the ledger in his hand on the table. 3 years ago, the Marquis of Jing'an led 100,000-strong army to battle against the northern Jin dynasty at the Yangue Pass. Both sides were strong in arms and horses, but after more than a year of fighting, they ultimately suffered a disastrous defeat. In this battle, the national treasury was emptied, resulting in countless deaths and injuries. The 3 cities in the northwest were also ceded to the northern Jin, and since then, they have been pinned down by this northern power. After the war, the Jing'an Marquis' mansion was the first to bear the responsibility. The Marquis of Jing'an went to the battlefield with his 3 sons. He and his eldest son died in battle. His third son, Xie Zian, also known as Lu Yunxiang's husband, was killed on horseback by the northern Jin cavalry while transporting food and forage, and his body was trampled on, leaving him unrecognizable. Only his second son, Xie Zishuan, is still alive and is currently imprisoned in heaven. Since the establishment of the Jing'an Marquis dynasty, he has been ranked among the 8 major aristocratic families. The emperor did not want to involve too many people, so he only raided the Jing'an Marquis' mansion, confiscated all his family wealth, and did not reclaim his title. After this blow, the old lady fell ill and went back to her mother's house. The second lady went to the nunnery, and there were several children from the second room of the big house below. At this moment, Lu Yunxiang stood up and supported the family. Lu Yunxiang spread out several account books, including the Yenji studio, the silk shop, and the suburban orchard, all of which were her dowries. At that time, she had just married into the Marquis' mansion, and her dowry had not yet been recorded, so she managed to escape home theft. Nowadays, the Marquis' mansion is all about her. She picked up the booklet on the daily expenses of the Marquis' mansion and flipped through it page by page. When you see one of them, your pupils suddenly shrink. This one. She pointed it out to the accountant. I spend 100 taels every month. What is it for? Hu Jingfang glanced at it and said, this is the old lady's assistance to distant relatives. You should be aware of it. Lu Yunxiang did know and even knew that the money was sent to Wangshi village in Shiqiao town, but she lived her whole life and only realized when she died that this relative was actually her husband. Let's stop for now. This. I plan to open a rice and grain shop, and I will take all the silver money from my account when I come back. These poor relatives have been helping me for so long, and it's enough kindness and righteousness. Where is the old lady? Hu accounting room, how much is your monthly income now? Lu Yunxiang looked up at Hu accounting room. 3 taels of silver. Lu Yunxiang nodded and said, I'll raise it to 5 taels for you. Hu Wangfang widened his eyes and suddenly gained 2 taels of silver. Do you have any further questions? No, I'll go back and gather the silver money on my account. It's also convenient for Madame San to withdraw it. Okay, go ahead. After leaving the accounting room, Lu Yunxiang was supported by Jin Yan and walked around the room. These days, she has been suffering from severe back pain, so she has to get up and walk after sitting for a while. Madam, you haven't eaten much in the morning. Can I finish the noodles for you? Jin Yan asked with some concern. Lu Yunxiang shook her head, she had no appetite at all. Alas, by this time of rebirth, if the heavens really pity her, even if it's only 3 months earlier. Lu Yunxiang unconsciously stroked her stomach. Should she keep this child? By the way, madam, please ask the maidservant to listen to the movements of the east courtyard. The old lady just left. Let's go out too. Lu Yinxiang's apricot eyes twitched. Wangshe village in Shijiao town is located on the outskirts of Xingjing, and can be reached by carriage in just over an hour. Lu Yinxiang thought to herself, it's not from the ends of the earth. In her previous life, she never met him once. I have been trapped in a drum for my whole life, only to know before I die, and have been suffocated to death. The carriage walked onto the street and soon stopped. Why aren't you leaving? Jin Yan asked the coachman outside. The coachman replied, there are many officers and soldiers on the outskirts of Wenchangbo Mansion, and the people who are watching the excitement have blocked the road. Lu Yinxiang opened the car curtain and, separated by layers of people and soldiers, she saw the man standing at the door at a glance. He was wearing a black brocade robe, with a jade-like face and smiling phoenix eyes, playing with a peach blossom. In front of him knelt a woman in a crimson spring shirt, crying and kowtowing, begging the man to let go of her family. That woman is Yuan Qingyue, the eldest daughter of Changhua Mansion, one of the twin daughters of Xingjing, with exceptional talent and beauty. At various banquets, she often sees her as a proud woman. Lu Yinxiang put down the car curtain and said calmly, turn around and take another path. Seeing Yuan Qingyue, she thought of herself. That night, she begged him the same way. Madam. Jin Yan hesitated for a moment and whispered, with this Yuan girl, Lord Yan may not disturb you tonight. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Husband still alive. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Husband still alive. Lu Yinxiang closed his eyes and said, I won't go to Orchid Garden tonight. If Lord Yan. He can kill whoever he wants, I don't care anymore. 3 months ago, the crown prince was suddenly deposed. The court found out that he had had private correspondence with the late Marquis of Jing'an, so they began to re-examine the war in the northwest. The second lord of the Marquis' mansion, Xie Zishuan, was repeatedly interrogated by the East Factory and the Dali Temple in the prison and signed multiple confessions under torture. The Jing'an Marquis' mansion is in a panic. Even if there is no connection between Jing'an Marquis and the Crown Prince, after repeated questioning, even if there is no crime, there will still be some dirt involved. When the case arrived at the Dali Temple, the old lady heard that the magistrate of the temple, Yan Mu, loved to attract beautiful women, so she asked Lu Yinxiang to come and beg him. Lu Yinxiang was originally unwilling, but the crown prince was convicted of rebellion, and many courtiers were implicated and executed by 9 tribes. Seeing that the Marquis' mansion was about to be traced, Lu Yinxiang could only endure humiliation. She got into his bed, and he agreed to take Xiairi out. If he gets into trouble with a bad wolf, the consequence is for him to eat it dry and wipe it clean until he hates her, and then he can be relieved. Jin Yan looked at Madame and felt that she was different. Madam, you don't owe the Marquis' mansion anything. If you want me to tell you, it would be better to ask the old lady to give you a copy of the He Shu as soon as possible. He Li. Lu Yinxiang shook his head. They had tricked her for a lifetime, and she wouldn't just let them go so easily. After leaving the city and walking for over an hour, we arrived outside of Wangshe village. Lu Yinxiang got off the car and walked up the mountain road. Unlike the previous life, there is no peach blossom forest here yet, and there are mostly wild grass on both sides. He may have personally planted those peach trees, which he used for decades to give the woman a dreamy paradise. After crossing the wooden bridge, you can see the square courtyard. Compared to the thatched houses I saw when I came over, this yard is big and tidy, and the house is also a brick and tile house, which looks like a newly built one. Moreover, it was covered with her dowry money. They drank decades of her blood and ate decades of her flesh while killing without going too far. Madam, why don't we go in? Lu Yinxiang hissed at Jingyan and then pulled her to hide outside the door. At this moment, an old woman wearing a cloud brocade outer garment walked out, followed by a tall man wearing green clothes and short combat. San Yi. Jin Yen was so shocked that she couldn't speak fluently when she saw the man. Lu Yunxiang gestured to Jin Yen to speak softly. This is the poor relative of the old lady. Third brother, you've been suffering outside. It's better to go home early, said the old lady of the Marquis's mansion, looking at her youngest son with a worried expression. Xie Zian shook his head and said, Mother, Lin Yang saved my life and now she has given birth to a chubby son for me. I can't let her down. I won't go back to the Marquis's mansion anymore, and I don't care about my wealth and status. I just hope to live a peaceful and stable life with Lin Yang. However, my mother and son are sorry for you. Speaking, Xie Zian was about to kneel down, and the old lady quickly supported her son. You are an old man, and your mother and father have always loved you the most. Well, your father and 2 brothers have ended up like this, and my mother doesn't ask you to shine on your family, just ask you to be happy. How's my second brother doing in prison? Lu Shi begged Yen Mu, that cunning person, and has already taken out your second brother. He will be able to release him back home in another month or 2. She actually has some means. A fox-like person only has the means to flirt with men. Not to mention her, Lin Yang has added a grandson to our Xie family. In the future, she will send an extra 100 taels of silver every month, but we cannot let you and your child suffer. Thank you, mother. At this moment, a young woman came out holding the child. The woman wrapped her forehead in a handkerchief, so she probably hasn't given birth yet. Why did you come out? You're still holding the child, be careful of the wind, the old lady frowned. Mother, my daughter Law is sending you off, and there's Konga. He can't bear to part with his grandmother, said Lin Yang with a pleasing expression on her face. The old lady immediately smiled when she saw the child in Lin Yang's arms. Ouch, she looks exactly like your father when he was young. Grandma will often come to see you. Seeing that the old lady was about to leave, Lu Yunxiang quickly pulled Jin Yen away. Waiting for the carriage, Jin Yen finally understood. Madam, Third Lord hasn't died yet and is still living with other women. The old lady also knows that she gives money every month. Lu Yunxiang nodded. They're not fooling you. Yes, Lu Yunxiang whispered, the pit is so bitter. How could they do this? You took out all your dowry to offset the public account for the widowhood of the third master. After both the eldest and second ladies left home, you also raised several young masters and girls in the second room of the big house. Now, in order to save second lord, you have committed yourself to that great treacherous minister. And the old lady, how did she praise you in front of you, how did she rely on you, but behind your back she cursed you as a fox seducer and kept it from you. Speaking, Jin Yen couldn't help but cry. Lu Yunxiang couldn't cry anymore. In the first few days of her rebirth, she often cried, tears dried up, and only hatred remained. Why didn't you go in and poke them just now? Jin Yen said with hatred. Lu Yunxiang sneered with sharp eyes, I want Xie Zian to kneel in front of me and tell me personally that he is still alive. He and that woman don't want to live a peaceful life, she makes them restless for a lifetime. And this Jing'an Marquis's mansion, no matter how she propped it up, she destroyed it. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Early Planning. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Early planning. As soon as Lu Yunxiang returned to the mansion, he went to the accounting room and took all the silver money from the account. Returning to Ilan Xian, she asked Jin Yen to call a worker named Zhang Qi from the outer courtyard. This Qi has good martial arts skills, can read and write, and can also do accounting. His father was a Juren, and he took the imperial examination several times but failed. As a result, he went crazy. His mother sold him, the oldest in the family, to the Marquis's mansion in order to treat his father's illness. In her previous life, she accidentally discovered such a talent and has been staying by her side ever since. Not long after, Jin Yen led Zhang Qi in. He is tall, but very thin, with a dark skin color, wearing coarse cloth and shorts, and a patch on his chest. Seeing his old friend, Lu Yinxiang's eyes became a bit rough. Zhang Qi, what do you do in the outer courtyard? Zhang Qi said honestly, fix things, feed horses, plant flowers and grass, do carpentry, do everything. Lu Yinxiang suddenly remembered that Zhang Qi seemed to have told her that he had practiced 18 different skills in the courtyard outside the Marquis's mansion. Do you want to do something for me? Zhang Qi scratched her head and said, but I'm so foolish. What can I do for Madame San? Lu Yunxiang smiled. He's not stupid, he's clever when doing business. This is 3,000 taels of silver. Take it and set up a courtyard in Xingjing, which needs to be hidden. This courtyard is used to store grain and needs to be larger. There should be more rooms, and the roof should not leak. If there is any remaining silver, you can buy grain and store it in this courtyard. Lu Yunxiang pushed a wooden box to Zhang Qi. There are both cash and banknotes here, which are all the silver coins on the books of the Marquis's mansion. Zhang Qi widened her eyes, unable to believe that Lu Yunxiang had given him so much silver. Madame San, do you believe me? Letter. Lu Yunxiang patted the box and said, these 3,000 taels are not much. If you follow me in the future, you can earn much more than this. Zhang Qi pondered for a moment and said, I do know of a courtyard that has been abandoned for several years. It is very hidden, and the price is also cheap. It's just that people have died. I'm not afraid of dying, but I'm afraid of being confused with the government. No, that family committed suicide and no one reported it to the authorities. Lu Yunxiang nodded and said, then you go and handle it. Zhang Qi picked up the wooden box, took a few steps, and then turned to look at Lu Yunxiang. Madam, can I ask why it's me? Lu Yunxiang smiled and said, not long after you entered the mansion, you know whose food you are eating right now. Zhang Qi understood and said, I only serve my wife. Okay. After seeing Zhang Qi off, Jin Yan returned to the room and saw Lu Yunxiang staring blankly at the peach tree outside the window. Madam, why did you buy a yard to store grain? Madam already has a grain and oil shop under her name, and food can be purchased at any time, so there's no need to store too much. We are going to have a famine in Xingjing soon. Lu Yunxiang withdrew his gaze. Ah! Lu Yunxiang made a hissing gesture towards Jin Yan and said, this matter is confidential and must not be mentioned to anyone else. Jin Yan nodded hastily and said, I won't tell anyone to keep it safe. Seeing that it was getting late, Jin Yan was a bit worried. Madam, you really don't want to go to Lan Yuan anymore. That Yan is unpredictable. If he turns around to make things difficult for you, he might. I'm afraid my life is in danger. Lu Yunxiang shook his head and said, I won't go. He has a new love and won't think of me. At this time in her previous life, she remembered that Yan Mu favored Yuan Qingyue alone, and she went to Lan Yuan several times without seeing anyone. It wasn't until 3 months later, when he was ordered to go on a military expedition, that he remembered her. At that time, she had already beaten up the child and he knew about it, almost choking her. He also said that when he comes back, he must make her conceive another one, and never want to distance herself from him for the rest of her life. He said those words not because he had feelings for her, but because he did not allow the people he controlled to leave his control. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Surprisingly asking daughter.in.law to serve other men. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Surprisingly asking daughter.in.law to serve other men during dinner at night, Lu Yunxiang vomited just after taking a bite and quickly asked Jin Yan to withdraw all the food. Madam, I'll go and invite the doctor. Lu Yunxiang waved his hand and said, no need. But you haven't eaten much these past 2 days, how can that work? Lu Yunxiang shook his head and smiled bitterly, I'm pregnant. Ah! Jin Yan widened her eyes, who does your child belong to? Speaking these words, Jean Yen quickly gave herself a hard pat on the mouth. Who else can it be? It's not that big traitor, big villain. I am the third wife of the Marquis's mansion, a widow who is pregnant with the child of the current Dali temple minister. She said she would definitely have someone poke her spine, and even a spitting star could drown me. Especially my parents, if they find out, they might force me to hang myself. Lu Yunxiang spoke with a heart full of bitterness. Her father was a servant of the Ministry of Rights and had always adhered to the principles of propriety. After the death of the third lord of the Marquis's mansion in battle, he told her that he could never remarry and must remain a widow for his late husband for a lifetime, to be a chaste and martyred woman. Her mother came from a declining family and attached great importance to reputation. She taught her women's ethics from a young age and did not allow her to take any wrong steps. In the past, she did indeed listen to her parents very much, living deep in the boudoir at home, never being alone with men, and even talking. After marrying into the Marquis's mansion, I am filial to my elders, caring for my younger generation, and even if I remain a widow for a lifetime, I have no complaints. But what will happen to her in the end? This time, she needs to change her way of life. Jean Yen held Lu Yunxiang's hand and asked with red eyes, "Madam, what should you do?" Lu Yunxiang sneered, "What should I do? Of course, when Xie Zian returns to the mansion, he is willing to be the father of the child in my belly." That night, just as Lu Yunxiang was about to go to bed, the old lady arrived in a panic. "Why didn't you go and serve that traitor?" he asked with a disdainful expression as he entered the room. Lu Yunxiang's eyes turned red and he said, "Mother, what are you saying? You want your daughter-in-law to serve other men?" The old lady choked for a moment and said, "Well, your second brother is still in Yen Mu's hands. I feel guilty to the ancestors of the Xie family and to the third master." Lu Yunxiang interrupted the old lady's words and covered her chest, crying bitterly. "If the third lord had a spirit in heaven, he would definitely curse me as a fox seducer who specifically seduces men." The old lady blushed and said, Shouldn't you hear what she said to her youngest son? It's also impossible. If she knew her youngest son was still alive, she wouldn't be able to hold her breath. Jean Yen, go prepare a white silk for me. I have no face to live anymore, Lu Yunxiang cried. Jean Yen stood on the side, trembling with anger. Upon hearing this, she was also deeply saddened and approached to embrace Lu Yunxiang. "Madam, you have suffered such injustice for the sake of the Marquis's mansion. I don't know what outsiders will say, but as long as everyone in the Marquis's mansion is a person with a heart, she must remember your kindness. Third master, how could you be so ruthless and leave me, the newly married woman? My father is a servant of the Ministry of Personnel, and my mother is a noble daughter of a noble family. If it weren't for you, could I have come this far? You are so ruthless. Where are you? But that underworld, I will come to you and ask you in person. Are you serious? What kind of behavior are you crying and making noise about? I'm just asking you a question, but you're biting me and not letting me go," the old lady said with a gloomy face. "What does my mother want me to do?" Lu Yunxiang wiped a tear and asked the old lady. Lu Yunxiang looked at the old lady with red eyes, seeing if she had the face to repeat her words. The old lady also comes from a noble family and speaks of propriety, righteousness, integrity, and shame. She really can't express herself at the moment. Alright, just pretend I haven't been here before. Lu Yunxiang didn't leave a trace and wiped away her tears, saying, "Mother, my daughter-in-law will see you off." The old lady choked heavily and said, "No need, seeing you, I'm not bothering you enough." After speaking, he angrily left. Jean Yen was sent out, but still cried when he returned. "Madam, it is said that human hearts are made of flesh. Isn't their heart not made of stone, hard and unable to hold back the heat?" However, Lu Yunxiang didn't answer and pointed to the peach blossom tree outside the window, saying, "Let someone chop down this peach tree tomorrow." "Why? Plant a red plum, it will bloom in cold weather, and 100 flowers dare not compete with it. That night, Lu Yinxiang didn't sleep well. He didn't eat at night and got hungry in the middle of the night. Let Jin Yen make a bowl of noodles, but as soon as he took a bite, he vomited again and all his bile came out. I tossed and turned for most of the night, only to fall asleep at dawn. When I woke up, it was almost noon. Madam, Miss Wu came to greet you early in the morning. Seeing that you were still asleep, she waited for you while practicing her handwriting in the east room. Jin Yen helped Lu Yunxiang sit up, somewhat hesitant to speak. Madam, forgive me for daring. Why don't you want to see Miss Wu these days? End of this chapter. Chapter 6. You find it dirty, don't I? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. You find it dirty, don't I? Lu Yunxiang felt a bit dazed upon hearing these words. The fifth girl Xie Wenxiang was born out of a second wife. She was just 8 years old this year, and her aunt fell ill and passed away shortly after her birth. When the whole mansion had an accident, she was only 5 years old. The second lady let go, and the old lady didn't care either. Lu Yunxiang took the youngest 5 girls to her courtyard to take care of. Xiao Wu lived with her for over a year. The old lady was afraid that she would favor Xiao Wu and ignore the other children, so she let Xiao Wu live in the second room. Due to this affection, Xiao Wu has always been close to her. In his previous life, Xiao Wu accidentally fell into the river and drowned before getting married. Thinking of Xiao Wu's death, Lu Yunxiang's heart ached fiercely. In the previous life, Xie Zian was still alive. First, Mrs. Xie kept it from her, and then all the Xie family kept it from her until she accidentally saw the account book and found that this poor relative had been helping for almost 40 years, ranging from 100 taels to 1,000 taels per month. At that time, she was no longer in charge of the household and handed over the power of giving back to the second daughter. Law. Realizing that this matter was somewhat strange, she called someone up to her and started beating around the bush. The second daughter. Law couldn't hold back and finally revealed some clues. Later, Lao San said that Xiao Wu did not fall into the water unexpectedly, but rather the old lady had her pushed down and watched her drown alive. Originally, Xiao Wu accidentally learned that Third Lord was still alive and wanted to tell her about it. However, the old lady refused to let her speak and she didn't listen, so the old man took a harsh action. So everyone in the Xie family was sorry for her, except for Xiao Wu, whose heart was towards her. A few days ago, she was too confused and didn't know how to face the Xie family. The child came several times to greet her, but she never saw her. After grooming, Lu Yunxiang asked Jin Yen to call 5 girls in. The curtain opened and a little girl wearing a peach-colored spring shirt and combing 2 balls ran in, running all the way to her. San Yang. Other children call her San Auntie, but this child always likes to call her San Yang. Lu Yunxiang looked at the little girl's round and smooth face, watery eyes, and a cute and obedient appearance. Thinking back to the previous life, she was lost at a young age, and it was even more heartbreaking. San Yang, Jin Yen said you're sick. Are you feeling better now? Lu Yunxiang rubbed Xiao Wu's face and said gently, it's much better. But I think you've lost a lot of weight. Xiao Wu tilted his head. Lu Yunxiang smiled and said, I really don't have much appetite these past few days. Xiao Wu thought of something and made Lu Yunxiang wait, then ran out bouncing around. After waiting for a while, the child finally returned, sweating profusely. Lu Yunxiang asked Jin Yen to wet her handkerchief, and she pulled Xiao Wu to her and wiped her sweat. What are you running? Xiao Wu handed a purse to Lu Yunxiang and said, this purse was embroidered by me and contains sour plums. When San Yang has no appetite, she eats one. Lu Yunxiang looked at this purse, embroidered with cloud patterns. In the previous life, Xiao Wu gave it to her, and she cherished it for a lifetime. She really wanted to eat something sour, so she opened the purse, pinched one from inside, stuffed it into Xiao Wu's mouth first, and ate another for herself. Xiao Wusuan's eyebrows and eyes are extremely cute. Lu Yunxiang ate half a bowl of porridge because of the sour plum. At this moment, Jin Yan came over and said that the second lady had arrived. What happened, Lu Yunxiang could naturally guess. Let Xiao Wu go back first, and Lu Yunxiang invited second lady into the west room. After the incident at the Marquis's mansion, the second lady went to the nunnery and waited for the storm to pass before returning to the mansion. But the family doesn't care about any big or small matters and stays in the small Buddhist temple all day. Xia Zian is an old lady, and his second grandfather is more than 10 years older than him, so these two ladies are also much older than her. She was wearing a plain green spring shirt, not a single piece of jewelry, holding a string of Buddhist beads in her hand, with a gentle and calm face. She is indeed devoting herself to worshipping the Buddha and does not want to interfere with worldly affairs, but leaving her husband and children behind is even more of an escape. The old lady sent someone to call me over early in the morning and told me about your second brother. These two ladies were straightforward. Lu Yunxiang smiled and didn't answer the conversation. Madame Eyre sighed and said, "We all know that third brother has made a lot of contributions to the Marquis's mansion, and we are also very grateful to you in our hearts. If we don't have a way out, we can't take this step. Third brother, the principle of leaving something unfinished is in your hands. Your second brother's life is in your hands. What does sister.in.law want me to do? You understand in your heart. I don't understand." Madame Eyre frowned. In the past, Lu Yunxiang had great respect for her and would not be so troublesome. She paused and said, "Yan Mu covets your beauty. As long as you continue to serve him, please him, and completely resolve the Northwest case, your second brother will be able to come out of prison." Lu Yunxiang took a sip of his tea and said, "He likes anything beautiful. I feel that my sister.in.law is not as beautiful as her." Madame Eyre's face sank and she said, "What do you mean?" "Second sister.in.law wants to save your husband, so you should sacrifice yourself to climb Yan Mu's bed. He should quite like you. You're reckless. You let me do such a dirty job. You think it's dirty, don't I?" Lu Yunxiang sneered, "Besides, I'm just the younger brother's sister, and you're his wife." You. Second lady choked so much that she couldn't say anything because she didn't take any responsibility for it. Second sister.in.law has a general understanding and is sensible. As you speak, I will listen carefully. The second lady stood up with embarrassment and anger, and left angrily. As the two ladies walked away, Jin Yan clapped her hands. How soothing. Madam, you need to be tough when dealing with such shameless people. Lu Yunxiang did indeed feel relieved. In her previous life, she lived in a state of suffocation, but in this life, she has caused a huge upheaval. A few days later, someone suddenly arrived at the Dali temple and said they wanted to search for evidence of the relationship between the Marquis's mansion and the deposed crown prince. Tang Marquis's mansion, a Dali temple is easy to search, and no one dares to stop it. When the people from Dali temple left, the 4 children from the second room of the big room knelt together in her Elan pavilion. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Laughs at you for not being good at death. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 laughs at you for not being good at death. Lu Yunxiang asked Jin Yan to ask why they were kneeling. The children didn't know exactly why, but only said that their grandmother asked them to kneel and asked the third aunt to save the Marquis's mansion and save them. The old lady is too despicable to let a few children force you. If you don't agree, these children will have to hate you from now on. Lu Yunxiang breathed a sigh of relief. De Fong has 3 children. The eldest girl is already married and not in the mansion. The second young master is studying at the Imperial Academy, and the 4th girl has just reached her hairpin. There are 2 children in the second room, the 3rd young master is in the Martial Arts Academy, and the 5th girl is the little girl Xiao Wu. Let them kneel down, Lu Yinxiang said. Other people's children, they don't even hurt themselves, why bother her? Sure enough, in less than an hour, the old lady arrived. She didn't even enter the room and shouted outside, Yinxiang, I beg you for your mother's sake. Please save your second brother and our whole mansion. Look at these children, they are still so young. Can you bear to let them lose their lives? The old lady spoke of sorrow, and the children would die upon hearing it. They also began to beg Lu Yinxiang. The four girls cried as they spoke, except for Xiao Wu who remained silent. Seeing that Lu Yinxiang didn't show her face, the old lady wiped her tears and cried, Yinxiang, you can't be so ruthless. Dozens of lives in the whole family are in your hands. Please show mercy. If you don't come out of the house, do you want me, an elder, to kneel down for you? Jean Yen stomped her feet in anger inside the house and said, Madam, many servants outside the courtyard have knelt down. This will teach you how to handle yourself in the mansion in the future. Lu Yinxiang sneered, she didn't want me to show my face, so I let the Marquis's mansion show my face. Coming out of the room, Lu Yinxiang's eyes had turned red. Mother, what's your point? It seems like I'm trying to harm the Marquis's mansion. Yinxiang, if you let go, it's not like you've harmed the Marquis's mansion, said the old man in a popular tone. Lu Yinxiang nodded and said, what the old lady said is all right, but I can't say anything about you. Jean Yen, open the door and let's go to the street to argue. No decent person would force their daughter.in.law, especially a widow, to serve other men. Speaking, Lu Yinxiang was about to walk out when the old lady stopped her and knelt down to the ground. At this moment, both the lord and servants of the mansion were shocked. Mother, kneel down for you. Lu Yinxiang shook his body and said, Mother, my daughter.in.law can't bear it. If you want to harm me like this, I will hang myself at the gate of the Marquis's mansion. She went into the house and took the prepared white silk, really heading towards the door of the mansion. As soon as the gate of the Marquis's mansion opened, Bai Ling hung it up and Lu Yinxiang climbed onto a chair. Soon, many people gathered around. This is not the third lady of the Marquis's mansion. Is she going to hang herself? She is a widow, without anyone to support her in the Marquis's mansion, she must have suffered some great injustice. TSK, pitiful, you're still so young. The people outside started discussing. Jean Yen naturally had to cooperate, holding on to Lu Yinxiang's feet and crying to prevent her from doing anything foolish. Lu Yinxiang didn't cry, just had a resolute expression on his face. Just at this moment, I caught a glimpse. She saw Yen Mu riding past and stopped when she saw her, then looked at her with a look of interest on his face. This man likes to wear black clothes, but his face is like porcelain and jade, making him even more handsome. And a pair of slender phoenix eyes, with a hint of een when not smiling, and extremely inappropriate when smiling. But Lu Yinxiang knew very well that this person was a madman. The governor of the East Factory was his master, and he held the privilege of the East Factory. He also passed the imperial examination and became the top scorer in the Dali Temple. He was in charge of criminal cases, had a clear vision, and wielded power over the court and the public. He looked at her with a smile on his face, his gaze like when he was in bed, forcing her to do all sorts of shameful things. Beasts. Rogue. Shameless. Dirty. Lu Yinxiang held back his breath and didn't go up to slap him twice. At this moment, the butler ran out and said that the old lady had already returned to the east courtyard, urging her to quickly return to her own courtyard and not to embarrass herself again. Lu Yinxiang snorted secretly, wiped away his tears, glanced at Yen Mu again, and turned his head back home. At night, Lu Yinxiang went to Orchid Garden. This bad wolf must not be provoked, but if you are reckless, you don't have to be afraid of him. So, this time she took the initiative. This Orchid Garden is Yen Mu's mansion, which is actually a place for raising women. Jean Yen helped her out of the carriage with a worried expression on her face. Wait for me with peace of mind, Lu Yinxiang patted Jean Yen's hand. Entering the door, a maid led her towards the waterfall pavilion in the backyard. "He's there again, I think he must have had some alcohol." Sure enough, I went up to the second floor, but saw him leaning against the low collapse, pouring and drinking from himself. This is not quite right either. In fact, there is a portrait hanging not far away, and his eyes are full of the person in the painting. This villain is actually an infatuated person. The painting depicts a woman who is gentle and charming, especially with a pair of apricot eyes and swaying autumn waves. She is also a pair of apricot eyes, and Yuan Qinyue is the same. In fact, the woman brought by Yen Mu to the orchid garden is somewhat like the person in this painting. In the last life, the Marquis house invited the Chastity Memorial Archway for her. When she entered the palace to thank her, she finally saw this woman. At that time, she was already Empress Dowager Jean, but after Yen Mu supported his son to ascend to the throne, she framed him and ultimately ended up beheading him in public. "What are you laughing at?" Lu Yinxiang turned his head and saw Yen Mu looking at her with phoenix eyes raised, exuding a seductive charm. "Laugh at you, it's so easy to die." End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Give him a slap. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Give him a slap. Lu Yinxiang walked over and sat down on the other side of the low cave. "There is a beautiful woman like Yuan, what kind of idle wine are you drinking here?" Yen Mu smiled and said, "Every day I put on a bad face, and every time I touch her, I'm going to die. It makes me feel like a prostitute. Don't you just like this kind of tough guy? It does have a taste better than you." Lu Yinxiang smiled and said, "Congratulations to Lord Yen." Yen Mu poured a glass of wine and pushed it to Lu Yinxiang, top quality grape wine. "I don't drink alcohol. What do I want you to drink?" Lu Yinxiang picked up the wine glass and poured out the wine inside. "I have a temper. There has always been one, just too lazy to post it to you." Yen Mu smiled and looked up to take a big sip. At this moment, a maid hurriedly came in and reported, "Sir, it's not good. Miss Yuan is making a fuss about hanging herself." Yen Mu squinted his eyes and said, "Let her be happy." The maid saw that Yen Mu had no intention of personally stopping her, so she had no choice but to step down. "Look, this Yuan girl has more integrity than you." Lu Yinxiang smiled and pondered for a moment. "Do you want to make a bet?" Yen Mu looked at Lu Yinxiang and felt that she seemed different from usual today. But it's hard to say where it's different. How to gamble? Lu Yinxiang got up and walked to the window in the attic. The night breeze blew over and messed up her hair at the temples. "I bet Miss Yuan won't hang herself." Yen Mu shook his head and chuckled. "Today both of her parents died in prison. I have already told her the bad news." Lu Yinxiang frowned slightly and said, "You don't have such a heart for cherishing fragrance and jade." She asked, and I said, "Do you want me to lie and deceive her?" "Yes, this person is the most ungrateful. I bet she won't be willing to die." "What is the bet?" Lu Yinxiang walked back and pondered for a moment before saying, 10,000 taels, dare you? Yen Mu nodded nonchalantly, "Sure." Lu Yinxiang was about to sit aside and wait for the result, but as soon as he moved, he was pulled into Yen Mu's arms. She tried to struggle, but he trapped her hands and feet, while he lowered his head and kissed her. The familiar warmth made my heart tremble suddenly. His unique aura was as cold as the snow on a high mountain, making her eyes red with coldness. At this moment, a mouthful of wine poured into the mouth. She was so angry that he hammered him. He flipped over and pressed her onto the low ground, fiercely, almost crushing her. "Yen Mu. Oh, you dare to have a tantrum with me too." Lu Yunxiang gritted his teeth and lifted his hand to slap him. With a loud bang. Yen Mu was stunned for a moment, then rushed up in anger. Looking at Lu Yunxiang again, he saw her crying silently, holding back tears, but still couldn't stop flowing out from the corner of his eyes. Those apricots have both hatred and fear in their eyes. He tugged at the corner of his mouth, flipped over and sat aside, feeling a chilly pain in his lower jaw. He reached out and touched it, leaving 3 bloodstains on his hands. Damn it, how do you want me to go out? Lu Yunxiang sat up and took a deep breath, saying, I'm pregnant. What? Yan Mu was surprised. I'm pregnant, but it's none of your business. The child belongs to me alone, said Lu Yunxiang. In her previous life, she foolishly devoted her entire life to the Marquis's mansion, having no children, but as a result, Xie Zian enjoyed the happiness of family. In this life, she wants to keep this child, not close the strict twilight, just because it is her bone and blood. Yan Mu stared at Lu Yunxiang's stomach for a long time, then he took a strong sip of wine. Every time I make you drink the avoid child soup. Not once. Which time? On the night of Empress Xiaojin's ascension to the throne. Yan Mu was taken aback for a moment, then looked at the portrait not far away and thought back carefully. That night, the emperor held a palace banquet. He drank too much and came back to disturb Lu Yunxiang fiercely for a long time. Later, Lu Mama brought over the soup to avoid children, but it was accidentally knocked over by him. At that time, she was restless and didn't bother to add another bowl. So. I have already said that the child belongs to me alone. Let me tell you, it's just because my body is not convenient, I can't let you act recklessly in the future. Lu Yunxiang said impatiently. This is partly because, on the other hand, she dare not hide it from him. After all, this is a madman and she does not want to bear the consequences of driving him crazy. Upon hearing these words, Yan Mu took another heavy sip of wine and choked on it. Do you want to stay? Whether to stay or not is up to me alone. What do you think of me as? The first man to sleep, Lu Yunxiang shrugged. Oh, does that mean you may have other men in the future? It's none of your business. Yan Mu's face darkened and he said, You're not afraid that I might offend Xie Eryi, or even other people in the Jing'an Marquis' mansion. Lu Yunxiang looked at Yan Mu and said word by word, Kill whoever you like, I don't care. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Only talking about business and not personal affairs. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Only talking about business and not personal affairs. Yan Mu was taken aback again. Lu Yunxiang said he didn't care about the people in Jing'an Marquis' mansion. He still remembers how she was so ashamed and angry that she wanted to die, but for the sake of the life of the people of Jing'an Marquis' mansion, she still gave herself to him. Lord Yan, you are ruthless and ruthless, but I hope this child will not be like you in the future. Yan Mu suddenly smiled and said, The upper beam is not straight and the lower beam is crooked. He dares to tilt, I'll beat him up. At this moment, the maid came over and said that Miss Yuan had not hung herself, but she cried and fainted. Yan Mu sked and said, So Zhenlie is pretending. Lu Yunxiang smiled and said, You lost. Yan Mu said nonchalantly, Tomorrow you can go to the Ruichang Bank to collect it. Lu Yunxiang tilted his head and said, How about we do business? What kind of business? You give me 100,000 taels, and in a month, I will return you 11,000 taels. Soon, there will be a famine in Xinjiang. She wants to store more food before that, it will definitely be of great use. Yan Mu raised his eyebrows and said, Are you very short of money? Yes. Is it about personal matters or business? Mr. Yan is too serious, we don't have any personal matters. Where's the affair? Lu Yunxiang saw Yan Mufeng with raised eyes and a smile on the corner of his mouth, which was extremely inappropriate. He glared at him in anger. The 10,000 taels of silver I won earlier was my sincerity. Oh. Didn't you come prepared, did you? Mr. Yan can earn 20,000 taels per month, and such good business doesn't happen very often. Seeing Lu Yunxiang's serious expression on his face, Yan Mu waved his hand and said, If you want money, go and get it. I will entrust it to the manager. Since the business has been negotiated, the spring night is short and bitter, so I won't disturb Lord Yen, said Lu Yunxiang as he stood up to leave. Yen Mu grabbed her and said, knock on me and leave. Lord Yen, please pay attention to your words. From now on, I am not your woman, but your business partner. It's really cold outside, I'll warm your bed. No need. Lu Yunxiang clapped Yen Mu's hand and strode downstairs. Stepping down from the attic and walking in the corridor, Lu Yunxiang suddenly smelled a pleasant smell. This taste is fragrant but not greasy, very appetizing. At this moment, several maids came over from the corner with food boxes in their hands. The maidservants walked past one by one, and Lu Yunxiang suddenly called out to one of them. He sniffed it carefully and asked, what's inside this? The maid paused for a moment and said, glutinous rice chicken. You open it, let me take a look. The maid knew her identity and although she felt strange, she still opened the lid. The aroma rushed in, causing Lu Yunxiang's stomach to start beating. She hasn't eaten anything seriously for several days, she smells nauseous and vomits everything she eats. It's rare to see anything she can eat, and she wants to pick it up and eat it right away. This is for Miss Yuan, the maid paused and said. Lu Yunxiang reluctantly swallowed his saliva and said with a calm face, this smell is really unpleasant. After speaking, she strode forward with great strides. After walking for a while, she turned back and said to Jin Yen, after returning to the mansion, ask the kitchen to make me a sticky rice chicken. Ah! Jin Yen was taken aback. I'm almost starving and dizzy. Returning to the mansion, Jin Yen called the cook up and stuffed her with an ingot of silver before she was willing to wake up in the middle of the night to make glutinous rice chicken. It's already late at night when the chicken is ready. Jin Yen brought in a plate of glutinous rice chicken and said, Madam, hurry up and have some. Lu Yunxiang couldn't smell the taste right, took a forced bite, and then spat out several mouthfuls of yellow bile. This time, Jin Yen was very worried. The next day, Lu Yunxiang first went to the Dekheng Bank to collect silver bills, and then went to the house that Zhang Qi bought to take a look. The courtyard is quite large, and the houses are also in good condition. I bought it for 1,000 taels of silver. I bought rice for the remaining 2,000 taels as instructed by my wife, but recently the grain prices in Xinjiang have risen significantly. Originally, they were 500 yuan per stone, but now they all cost 600 yuan. Zhang Qi said. Lu Yunxiang frowned. 600 yuan per stone is indeed too expensive. In that case, she wouldn't be able to earn much at all. I have built granaries all over the country, and the price of grain varies from place to place according to local conditions. Last year, when there was a big harvest of grain, the price of grain in other places except Xinjiang fell. For example, in Anzhou, it was only 400 yuan and a stone. Xinjiang has a special situation, and the price is set by the Ministry of Household, which generally does not fluctuate too much. Zhang Qi said. We can transport grain from Anzhou, said Lu Yunxiang. Zhang Qi shook her head and said, it's almost the rainy season. If you buy too much grain, you might get damp and moldy. Lu Yunxiang smiled and said, don't worry about this, we won't keep it for too long. As she spoke, she took out a silver note worth 100,000 taels and gave it to Zhang Qi. Is this buying all the grain? Yes. Zhang Qi was stunned for a moment and said, Madam, I must remind you again that this is too risky. Don't worry, I have my own ideas. After pondering for a moment, Zhang Qi said, nowadays, both water and land routes are not very peaceful. We need personnel to escort us. This question came to Lu Yunxiang's mind before he approached Zhang Qi. Don't you have any colleagues who know Kung Fu? There is an old man in the village where Zhang Qi is located. When he was young, he traveled abroad and learned martial arts. However, due to the bad world, he became a bandit and enjoyed drinking and eating meat for several years. Later, he was cleared and imprisoned by the official army. After 30 years, when I came out again, my hair was bright. I had no choice but to go back to my hometown. Because he knew Kung Fu, he taught a group of young boys in the village how to learn Kung Fu in exchange for food, and these boys became good brothers. In the previous life, after she grew her business, Zhang Qi called his brothers from the countryside, who were old friends who had been with her for a lifetime. Zhang Qi hurriedly said, "There really is." Lu Yunxiang nodded and said, "We can't make too much noise about grain transportation. It's better to do it in secret. You all need to be honest." Otherwise, before the famine, she stored a large amount of food, and if someone caught her, it would be difficult for her to explain. "I understand." Zhang Qi looked at the silver note in his hand, his eyes couldn't help but heat up, not only because it was 100,000 taels, but also because the third lady trusted him. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Should we summon his soul? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Should we summon his soul? Lu Yunxiang returned to the Marquis's mansion and didn't do anything. Anyway, he just felt tired and couldn't get up when he lay down. Jin Yan went to the kitchen to cook a bowl of clear noodles in soup for her, and she only drank a few mouthfuls of noodle soup. "Madam, you can't do this. Why don't you hire a doctor?" Lu Yunxiang shook his head and said, "No way." As soon as the doctor was hired, the matter of her pregnancy couldn't be contained. "Women carrying children are like this, it will be okay in a few days, I can hold on." Jin Yan nodded and said, "By the way, I just heard from the cook in the kitchen that the old lady is sick. That must be due to my illness. The servant seems to be pretending." Lu Yunxiang smiled and said, "She wants me to be submissive." "Madam, don't pay attention to her." Lu Yunxiang didn't want to pay attention and didn't have the energy. It was just that in the middle of the night, the second young master Xia Linqing knocked on the door, saying that the old lady had dreamed of the third master. Now she was crying in the ancestral hall, holding the third master's spirit card and fainting several times. "Ling Pai." Lu Yunxiang sneered, "People are still alive, and she doesn't mind bad luck. Therefore, Lu Yunxiang must go and see how she can cry." Putting on a cloak, Jin Yan supported her on the side and then arrived at the ancestral hall, where servants were kneeling outside. The second wife and a few children were also outside. Everyone saw her and automatically gave way. Lu Yunxiang walked over, but the second lady blocked her way. "Lu Shi, take a look at this Marquis's mansion. You have stirred it up and down, making it restless. If you have any filial piety, you should obey your mother." Lu Yunxiang smiled and said, "If my second sister-in-law has filial piety, she should be in Yan Mu's bed now, right? You don't insult my mother." Third young master Xia Linyu clenched his fist and rushed to Lu Yunxiang. Xia Linyu is 15 years old and tall and strong. Lu Yunxiang spent a lot of money to send him to the martial arts academy to learn martial arts, but now his fist is facing him. Third young master, no matter how hard your fists are, they cannot contain a single word of reason. Before learning to intimidate people with martial arts, learn to distinguish right from wrong. In this life, she had only one good word for Xia Linyu, and there was nothing else to say. In the previous life, she sent him to a martial arts academy to plan his future, helped him marry a wife, and even raised his children, putting in every effort. He gained military power and allowed the Jing'an Marquis's mansion to regain its glory. But how he treated her, he also held a knife in his hand, cutting through her flesh and blood one by one. Entering the ancestral hall, the old lady was crying while holding Xie Xian's memorial tablet, so much so that she couldn't even lift her head and her throat was hoarse. "Mother, what are you doing?" The old lady saw her and held Xie Xian's spirit card for her to see. "I dreamt of the third person. He said he was cold and hungry, so pitiful to be alone. He also said he didn't close his eyes and didn't even find his body." Lu Yunxiang sighed and said, "No, at that time it was only said that his body was trampled on by the iron cavalry of Beijing, but since it was trampled on, maybe it wasn't him who died. Mother should think this way, maybe Third Lord is still alive. The old lady suddenly choked and said, How? How could you still be alive? Mother doesn't want him to live. That's impossible. Lu Yunxiang nodded and said, It's really impossible. The old lady felt that the words were getting further and further away from the topic, so she turned back and said, The third brother is not at ease with his family, especially his second brother. The dead are dead, but the living bear all the blame. He even asked his second brother how he was in his dream, and how I would answer, so I could only cry. He told me not to cry and said he was unfilial, but fortunately, after marrying a wife, she will take his place in filial piety. My newly married wife became a widow, and he didn't say he was sorry to me. Why did he apologize to you? The old lady said with a hint of guilt, You are his wife, and you don't even close your eyes when he dies. Shouldn't you pity him and fulfill his last wish on his behalf? After careful consideration for a while, Lu Yunxiang said, according to his mother's words, he should have become a lonely soul and a wild ghost. It seems like we made the Iguan tomb, but he couldn't find it. Well, I heard someone mention a divine grandmother who is particularly powerful and can summon souls. As long as you ask her to set up an altar and cast spells at the Iguan tomb, she will definitely be able to summon the soul of the third master back. The old lady was a bit dumbfounded when it came to summoning souls. He can say that even if this person is not dead, he can still summon his soul. Move over. Then you'll die. Without soul, one must become a fool even if they don't die. Upon hearing these words, the old lady could only cry and deceive her. Third, my mother has been seriously ill these past few days. I think she will come down to accompany you soon. Don't be afraid, my mother will come soon. Your daughter-in-law is a ruthless person. She refuses to save your second brother, and she is not filial to your mother. Lu Yunxiang's apricot eyes flashed with a hint of sarcasm. My mother had a premonition that her end was approaching. Although my daughter-in-law is unfilial, she will definitely bury you in a grand funeral. What are you saying? Lu Yunxiang was too lazy to pay attention to her, so he turned around and walked out. As she walked to the door, she instructed the butler below, Tomorrow you go to the coffin shop and place a good coffin. The old lady said she hasn't had much time left, so she needs to prepare earlier. After speaking, Lu Yunxiang walked out. End of this chapter.